Welcome back to Serger Tip Clips. Well, if you took my decorative stitch class on Zoom a while back, we stitched out a variety of different decorative serger stitches. And I told you to save your good samples because we could use them in an upcoming pattern. And here it is. This is the laptop travel case. And on it, we have windows. And we've showcased some of these different techniques in it. And they can be any variety of techniques that you want in either any of the windows. But on the back of it, I did a single one. And it's with this beautiful diamond technique. And this is 3-thread rolled hem pin tucks. And I thought it would be fun to take a look at how we do these and how they're created. It's really one of those showstopper types of techniques that I thought was really pretty. And it got a lot of attention when I did an in-person class recently at a dealer. So we'll talk about that. But the only thing that's done on the serger is the 3-thread rolled hem pin tucks themselves. The rest of the technique is done by hand. And I know that's a 4-letter word for some of you, but I think that for as pretty as it is worth the time and effort that it takes to create this. It's a type of technique that you would probably just do for a small scale, and putting it in back of a window as essentially a reverse applique is a perfect way to showcase it without having to do anything on a huge big scale. So, but if you want to, you certainly can. I'll show you a couple of different beading selections that I made, and you can decide which ones that you like and the effect. They're all very pretty, but it's just a matter of how you want it to look. So let's go over to the machine, take a look at the setup, and then we'll do some table shots to see the actual hand stitching on this. Now this one is a slightly larger scale, and on another one that I did, I used a slightly smaller scale for the diamonds on this one. And it was just a 1/4 of an inch difference, but you can see what a difference it makes on the size of the little diamonds that are formed. And the beads have a tendency to kind of flip around, but that's no big deal. They're still pretty. And if you wanted to do this without beads, if that's not your thing, you could certainly do it and just pull it together with the thread. But I like beads. I have a huge collection of them, so I wanted to use them, and I think it really just adds a very nice touch to this travel case. Let's take a look at how to get started. On the right side of this quilting weight cotton, which is the exact same one as the blue example that I showed you this on the cover of the laptop case pattern, I chalked on lines that are 1 inch apart parallel to each other, and you'll see these little hash marks that go across the top, and that is so that I make sure that I always start stitching on this edge of the fabric, because I want that decorative thread that is in the upper looper, and I'm using a 40 weight machine embroidery thread that is variegated. I want that to always show when I press all of the pin tucks in the same direction. So that is my way of making sure that I do start on the correct edge beforehand. So now it's time to go over to the machine and do the actual stitching on these. Before I start stitching, let me give you my machine setup. I'm on stitch number 8, the 3-thread rolled hem. I have my right needle and upper looper on the default tension setting of 4. And I like my tension setting on the lower looper a little bit higher. I put it up to 7. I have my differential feed on 1 because this is a quilting weight cotton that's nice and stable. And I put my stitch length on about 1.6. So let's see how that is. And again, my favorite little tool here, I have my seam guide on, or my fabric guide. And this is great because this allows me to really keep my pin tucks nice and straight as I go along. I'm folding on the chalk line, and I put my clear foot on so you can see. Now, if I happen to nick the edge of the fabric, the fold of the fabric, it's no big deal because it'll be covered with a stitch anyway, so it's not a problem. But I'll hopefully not nick it. So I think I'll move this over just a touch more. And let me lighten this and straighten it out. Okay, I think I'm set. So I'm going to just stitch along, and I'm going to hold on to my thread chain in the back because with rolled hem pintuck, sometimes that rolled hem stitch kind of pigtails and the thread chain can get caught in your starter stitches. So let's hold on to that for security. There's my first one. Let me cut off that thread chain too and show it to you. Okay, and you can see a little bit of the fabric peeking through, but I like that look. That's the thing I want. I don't want too dense a stitch on the pintuck because I want it to stay flexible. So that's the first one done. Now I'm just going to fold, and as you fold back, make sure that underside of your fabric isn't going to get hung up in your stitching. So just make sure you've got it nice and flat, because that could be kind of a tragedy. That would make you have to start all over, and we hate it when that happens. So here's the second. And I'm just going to continue along for the other ones. I have 8 lines done, so I'll just stitch the other 6, and I'll see you back at the table. I drew my first line on with a friction pen, and now I'm going to put my horizontal lines 3/4 of an inch apart from each other. These are my guides for where my stitching is going to go, and it will give me nice, even diamond patterns across. And so now I'm going to thread a hand needle, and I'm going to grab some beads, and I'll show you how the pattern of this comes together. It's really fun. I'm using a beading needle, which is very fine and short. And one thing to know if you are planning to use beads is to make sure that your needle will go through the eye of it, because I know I have sometimes had some beads that were really tiny with holes, and I had a regular needle threaded up and found out that it wouldn't go through the eye. So I just generally switch to a beading needle just to prevent having to change it out. But I've got a double thread, just like when you're doing a button. And what I'm going to do is I am going to start on the back side. I'm going to bring that needle right up on the side of the pintuck, right on that red line. Pull it through. And I should probably use a contrasting thread, but I wanted it to match. Then I bring it over to the other side of the next pintuck in line, again, right on that red line, and bring them together, pass it right through that first pintuck, and snug it up tight. And then for security, I do one more pass. Just like this. Pull it tight. And then I drop my bead on the needle. Bring that down. Bring it right on top of where they're joined and do the exact same thing again. And I go through twice to secure the bead on top. Just bring it right through that hole in the bead. And you want to snug that up so it stays put too. And bring that down. And I do each pintuck individually, because if by some chance one of the threads broke or got snagged on something, the whole thing isn't going to fall apart. So there's my first one. And now on the back side, I'm just gonna pull the thread through. And this is the way I like to do it. I pull it once through the loop, pull the loop tight, through the next loop, pull it tight, and just one more time, just like that. And I snip. So that's the first one done. And then I go to the next two, and I'm going to go across, and I'll have the first row done. So I'll just show you again. Let me just put a knot in my thread. Here's the top row completed. So you can see the beads are on here. Now for the second row down, I am going to grab in between there, and you can kind of see already how you're going to get that nice diamond appearance on that. So I'll start down here, and it's just a repetition of the exact same technique. I did find that you want to keep the size of the bead relatively small, I think, because if you have too big a bead, sometimes I think it almost overpowers the look of the stitching and the diamond pattern. So you want them just to kind of complement each other and not have one really stand out against the other, especially if it's just the bead. You want really the pattern to take center stage. So there's my first one cut. There it is. I'll continue across, and I'll see you when the second row is done. I thought I should show you this on the outside pin tuck. Even though there's not another one to join it to, what I'm doing is just pulling that pin tuck over kind of at the same angle that the opposite side is, and I'm just catching it with a couple of stitches. Although if you're going to put this in a window, it might be advisable not to put a bead on this outside one, simply because when you're stitching around it, it's hard sometimes for the presser foot on your sewing machine to go over that. And I learned that the hard way on another project, that I had to hand stitch it into the window. So I'm going to leave that plain, and that's why. Okay, so now we're ready for the third row, and this is really going to start to see where the diamond shape takes place. And I kind of like the way the fabric sort of puckers in the diamond shape right with inside of it. So now you're starting to really see how this whole shape comes together. And when I give this a press, because this is a friction pen, all of these lines will disappear. So I don't have to worry about those showing up on the final part of this. So I'll just go across, but here we go. You can see those diamonds starting to form. So let me get across, and I'll continue on the other rows, and I'll show you this at the end. Here's our completed diamond motif. Now you can see up here I used the green glass beads that I started with, and these pretty closely match the thread that created the pin tucks. But then just for comparison, I decided to go with something that has a little bit of pink in it, but again, has that translucency of the same green glass beads, but just a little bit different color. for you to kind of do a comparison and decide what you like the look of. I do like both of them. The green matching the stitching is a more subtle look. If you want something that stands out a little bit more, I might pick a slightly different color. But I also took this sample that I did with the pink fabric and the pearl beads on it, because that even gave greater contrast. Now these are more opaque, so they really stand out compared to the translucency of these beads. And they're all very nice choices. It's just a matter of which one you prefer. So that is how that technique is done. And I hope you try it, because I think it's just like a super, super beautiful way to show off a serger stitch. And again, it just started off with a 3-thread rolled hem pin tuck. So I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for joining me today. And as always, if you have a comment or question, leave it below and I'll get back to you quickly. But I would love to see it. If you decide to try this technique, please send me some photos, because I love seeing the way different people interpret a various technique. And I think this one has so many possibilities on all sorts of projects. I would love, love, love to see yours. So thanks for joining me today. Happy sewing and serging.